everyone. Today we are going to look at the story To Build a Fire, which is there in the syllabus of class 12th ISC 2021-22. This story is written by Jack London, and day had broken cold and grey, exceedingly cold and grey, when the man turned aside from the main Yukon trail and climbed the high earth bank where a dim and little traveled trail led eastward through the fat spruce timberland. Now, when he was walking, this man, at that time the day had become cold and grey, although the day had just started. The day had just started means it was morning time, still it was cold and grey. There was no sign of the sun, and this man, he had come from the main Yukon trail and now had to go further. He climbed a high earth bank, and then he could see that a little traveled, you can say narrow lane was passing through the spruce trees. Spruces are trees which grow on such, you can say, snowish type of atmosphere. It was a steep bank, and he paused for breath at the top, excusing the act to himself by looking at his watch. Now, as he had climbed the earth bank, it was steep, it was hard to climb on it, but somehow he reached at the top and he was panting for breath. But in order to overlook that he was panting, he looked at his watch. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. There was no sun, nor hint of sun, though there was not a cloud in the sky. There was no cloud in the sky. It didn't mean that it was going to rain, but there was no sign of sun. It was a clear day, and yet there seemed an intangible pall over the face of things, a subtle gloom that made the day dark, and that was due to the absence of sun. Although it was a clear day, it was morning, but still there was some pale type of, you can say, appearance on each and everything around, as if it was growing evening. And there was a subtle gloom. Subtle gloom means, you can say, a very thin layer of gloomy atmosphere, dark atmosphere was spreading all around, and it was all because of the absence of sun. The fact did not worry the man. He was used to the lack of sun. It had been days since he had seen the sun, and he knew that a few more days must pass before that cheerful orb, due south, would just peep above the skyline and dip immediately from the view. And this man had been walking for several days in this atmosphere, so he was used to this, you can say, to this type of nature in which the sun was not visible. And he knew that several more days would take before the sun could rise in the sky. The man flung a look back along the way he had come. The Yukon lay a mile wide and hidden over 3 feet of ice. On the top of this ice there was as many feet of snow. Now, when he turned to look back from where he had come from the Yukon trail, he saw that all that trail was filled with the sheet of ice, one above the other, one above the other. It was so many feet of ice over it. It was all pure white, rolling in gentle undulations where the ice jams of the freeze-up had formed. North and south, as far as his eye could see, it was unbroken white, save for a dark hairline that curved and twisted from around the spruce-covered island to the south, and that curved and twisted away into the north. Now he could see that everywhere it was white, because snow was continuously falling, and he could see that everywhere, wherever his eyes could go, that much part of the island was covered with ice and ice. It was all white. But the only thing that he could see was a thin line of lane going in between the spruce trees of that island, and this path was leading to the south, and again it curved and twisted towards the north. where it disappeared behind another spruce covered island. And then, wherever he could see, it was going through the north. After that, he saw that the path had vanished behind another spruce island. This dark hairline was a trail, the main trail that led south 500 miles to Chilkut Pass, Dei, and salt water. Now, if he followed this trail, this thin trail between the spruce trees, then this was a main trail which could lead him to the Chilkut Pass, the Dei, and the salt water, and that led north 70 miles to Dawson. And if he reached to that salt water and that Chilkut Pass and Dei, from there onwards 70 miles away he could reach to Dawson, and still on the north 1,000 miles to Nulato. And then when he would reach to Dawson, from there to the north 1,000 miles he would have to travel to reach to Nulato, and finally to St. Michael on Bering Sea. And after Nulato he would pass through the Bering Sea to reach at St. Michael, which was 1,000 miles and half 1,000 more. This was a distance that he had to still travel. That means 1,000 miles and half 1,000 more, or you can say 15,000 miles. But all this, the mysterious far-reaching hairline trail, the absence of sun from the sky, the tremendous cold, and that strangeness and weirdness of it all made no impression on the man. But now, since the distance he knew was about 15,000 miles, this narrow trail through which he had to go, plus the added coldness of the weather, plus the absence of the sun, all this strangeness and weirdness of the atmosphere did not bother that man at all. It was not because he was long used to it. He was a newcomer in the land, Chicago, and this was his first winter. It was not so that he was used to all this thing, but actually he was a newcomer. Now, since he was a newcomer, though it was his first travel through this type of atmosphere, Chicago as a word used here means Native American word for a newcomer. A newcomer is said to be Chicago. The trouble with him was that he was without imagination. The only problem was that he could not imagine things. What would happen next? What should I do before anything could happen to me? He was quick and alert in the things of life, but only in the things and not in the significances. Here they have said that he was quick and alert in all the things that would come his way, but he was not alert in the imaginations and the importance of those things that could bring some you can say result to him. 50 degrees below zero meant 80 odd degrees of frost. So that means the temperature over there was below minus 50 degrees, or you can say they are saying that 80 odd degrees of frost. Then such fact impressed him as being cold and uncomfortable, and that was all. Now, because he knew that the temperature may be below 50, and that is making me feel very much cold and I'm uncomfortable in this environment, that was all he could tell to himself, that I am uncomfortable, and nothing else could he imagine. It did not lead him to meditate upon his frailty as a creature of temperature and upon man's frailty in general. This fact did not even force him to think that he is a warm-blooded animal, and a warm-blooded animal has got some limitations of his own, that he cannot tolerate a temperature below 50 degree or whatever are the limitations of a normal human being. In general, able only to live within certain narrow limits of heat and cold, and from there on it did not lead him to the conjectural field of immortality and man's place in the universe. And since he had not thought all about these things, so he did not even think that I am an immortal person and I have to die once. What is my place in the universe as a human being? He did not think all about these things. 50 degrees below zero stood for a bite of frost that hurt and that must be guarded against by the use of mittens, ear flaps, warm moccasins, and thick socks. Now, minus 50 degrees means you have to take care of yourself. You have to put on so much of warm clothes in order to protect yourself. Like you have to wear mittens. Mittens means a covering on the hand, just like gloves that are very warm. Then ear flaps to hide your ears from that cold wind. Okay, then you have to use moccasins, and moccasins are like, you can say, thick boots, like, right? And so all this was necessary, and thick socks were necessary. Now 50 degrees below zero was to him just precisely 50 degrees below. Now if he could you can say estimate that the temperature was minus 50, for him it was only minus 50. Nothing else of such kind he thought about himself, that I should cover myself with warm clothes or something like that. That there should be anything more to it than it was, then that was a thought that never entered his head. So nothing of such things came to his mind. As he turned to go on, he spat speculatively. There was a sharp, explosive crackle that startled him. Now, when he moved on, immediately he spat, and as he spat, a crackling sound occurred in the air, which surprised him a lot. He spat again. Again he tried to spat, and again in the air, before it could fall to the snow, the spittle crackled. Before that spit could go into the floor of the ice, in the air only it crackled. This means it was very, very cold. He knew that at 50 below spittle crackled on the snow, but this spittle had crackled in the air. He only had an idea that if the spittle goes to the snow below 50 degrees, then it cracks. But this spit that he had given out had crackled in the air. Undoubtedly, it was colder than 50 below. How much colder he did not know. So there was no doubt left that the temperature was not below 50, it was much more less than that. But how much was it? He was unaware of it. He was bound for the old claim on the left fork for Henderson Creek, where the boys were already. They had come over across the divide from Indian Creek country, while he had come the roundabout way to take a look at the possibilities of getting out logs in the spring from the islands in the Yukon. Now he actually had to go to Henderson Creek, where some boys were waiting for him. They had come directly through a divider from the Creek country, but he had taken a long roundabout way to have a look at where could logs of wood be found through the Yukon pass or through the Yukon island. He would be in the camp by 6 o'clock, a bit after dark, it was true. But the boys would be there, a fire would be going on, and a hot supper would be ready. He knew that if I keep on walking, I will reach there latest by 6 o'clock in the evening, and that would be a bit dark. But he knew that the boys over there would be enjoying. They would be having a camp, some fire would be lit, they would be having good supper, a hot supper. As for lunch, he pressed his hand against the protruding bundle under his jacket. It was also under his shirt, wrapped up in a handkerchief and lying against the naked skin. Now that was for the dinner that the boys could be making for him at night. But what about the lunch? For lunch, he put his hand around his waist below the jacket, and then he found that a bundle was lying there. That bundle was even below his shirt. It was attached to his skin, and it was actually a handkerchief which contained some lunch for him. It was the only way to keep the biscuits from freezing. This means the handkerchief had biscuits. He smiled agreeably to himself as he thought of those biscuits, each cut open and soaked in bacon grease, and each enclosing a generous slice of fried bacon. The biscuits, when they were purchased, they were cut open They were dipped in the bacon grease, and in between the two biscuits, some bacon slices were put. So he was thinking about that lunch and smiling to himself. He plunged in among the big spruce trees. The trail was faint. A foot of snow had fallen since the last sled had passed over, and he was glad he was without a sled, traveling light. In fact, he carried nothing but the lunch wrapped in the handkerchief. Now he took the path of the big spruce trees, and there he could see that the road was very frail. It was a very narrow type of road. It was faint. He could not see what other step to take because the road was not clear. And he could see that around a foot of snow had fallen when the last person had passed through a sled over there. And he was happy that I am not in a sled. I can go on foot and I am light in weight. He had nothing with himself. Nothing. No instrument or anything of that except for a lunch. He was surprised, however, at the cold. It certainly was cold, he concluded, as he rubbed his numb nose and cheekbones with his mittened hand. Now he was surprised that it was very, very cold, and then he tried to touch his nose, which became numb in the cold, and the cheekbones, and then he tried to touch them with his mittened hand. He was a warm, whiskered man, but the hair on his face did not protect the high cheekbones and the eager nose that thrust itself aggressively into frosty air. So, since he was having whiskers, mustache over his face, but this was not enough to cover or protect his cheekbones. That hair was of no use, and even the nose was thrust high in the air only, and so it had become numb. At the man's heels trotted a dog, a big native husky, the proper wolf dog, grey-coated and without any visible or temperamental difference from its brother, the wild wolf. Now beside his heels walked a dog, which was a wolf dog, which had a thick grey coat over his skin, and there was no difference between him and a wolf, if anybody could see. The animal was depressed by the tremendous cold. Even the animal could not bear it. This dog could not bear this extreme cold, and it knew that it was not a time for traveling. The dog had an instinct that it is not the correct time for traveling in this snow. Its instinct told it a truer tale than was told to the man by man's judgment. In reality, it was not merely colder than 50 below zero, it was colder than 60 below, than 70 below. Now the instinct of the dog was much sharper, and he knew that it is very, very cold and it's not a good time to travel. His mind was working very well, more than the mind of that man who, after seeing so many things, could not make out what to do. Now the temperature over here was not below 50, it could have been below 60 or below 70. It was 75 below zero. Since the freezing point is 32 above zero, it meant that 107 degrees of frost maintained. So on the whole, it was assumed that it was 75 below zero, and the freezing point is around 32 degrees above zero. So it meant that 107 degrees of frost was all over that island. The dog did not know anything about thermometers, possibly in its brain. There was no sharp consciousness of a condition of very cold, such as was in the man's brain. But the brute had its instinct. It experienced a vague but menacing apprehension that subdued it and made it slightly slink along at the man's heels. Now we all know that dogs do not have consciousness or any type of, you can say, intelligence, but the instinct works fast. So the dog, he used his instinct, and it experienced some menacing. Menacing means a threatening type of apprehension or an assumption that it is very dangerous to move ahead. And so he tried to only just crawl beside the heel of that mule. He did not want to go in a fast pace. And that made it question eagerly every unwanted movement of the man, as if expecting him to go into the camp or to seek shelter somewhere and build a fire. It seemed as if he was trying to request the man that if we could set up a camp or we could seek shelter somewhere and build a fire to warm ourselves. The dog had learned fire and it wanted fire, or else to burrow under the snow and cuddle its warmth away from the air. Dog had seen the fire over here, so it was well acquainted that if a fire would be burnt, then I would be warm. Or otherwise, it wanted to go deep below the snow, burrow below the snow, and keep itself warm by cuddling itself. The frozen moisture of its breathing had settled on its fur in a fine powder of frost, and especially where its jowls, muzzle, and eyelashes whitened by its crystalled teeth. Now the frozen moisture was settled on the skin of the dog at the back, on its fur, in the form of a fine powder, especially its jaws, muzzles, eyelashes, all these were all covered with that white snow. The man's red beard and mustache were likewise frosted, but more solidly, the deposit taking the form of ice and increasing with every warm, moist breath he exhaled. Now the man had red mustaches and red beard. Even there also snow was all over, covered in the form of a powder. But this deposit was taking the form of an ice over here, over his face. Because as he exhaled the breath, immediately that moisture could help that snow freeze. Also, the man was chewing tobacco, and the muzzle of ice held his lips so rigidly that he was unable to clear his chin when he expelled the juice. Now, the man was chewing tobacco, and even the muzzle was covered with snow. Okay, so the muzzle of ice had covered his lips in such a way that when he wanted to spit out the juice of the tobacco, he could not clear his chin. The result was that the crystal beard of the color and the solidity of the amber was increasing its length on his chin. Now when he spat, so some of the juice had fallen on his chin where the beard was. Now it was brownish in color, reddish in color, and the crystal of ice had, you can say, frozen over there, and even the juice had come out, so the color was quite different. If he fell down, it would shatter itself like glass into brittle fragments. But he did not mind the appendage. Now he knew that if he would fell down, then that snow would, you can say, fall on the ground and it would crackle into pieces. But he did not mind that. If snow is depositing over here, it's okay. It was the penalty of all tobacco chewers paid in that country, and he had been out before in 2 cold snaps. They had not been so cold as this, he knew, but by the spirit thermometer at 60 mile, he knew they had been registered at 50 below and 55. He had been on such type of travels in cold, but that time the 2 travels that he had done, that was not so cold as this was. And he had a spirit thermometer at 60 mile, which had recording that the temperature was below 50 or 55.